Hear that? Nothing? Me neither. But that's the perfect spot for your company's name to step into the spotlight. Become an underwriter for As You Mic It and let every episode be your curtain call. Slip a note to podcast@pashakespeare.org for more information.
If I have to leave to go to Emmaus, that's not far away.
Sure. There is a mountain, though, that separates Center Valley from Allentown, and for some people, that is a barrier not to cross. Welcome to As You Mic It, the official podcast of Pennsylvania Shakespeare Festival. I'm Jason King-Jones, Artistic Director, and as always, I'm joined by my co-hosts, Education Director and Community Engagement Director Kim Carson.
Hello.
And Associate Producer Connie Behringer.
Hi.
We're doing a little bit of a wing it job today when it comes to putting together Act 1. We've had so many amazing conversations, and one of them is going to be coming up in Act 2. Guy Roberts, the Artistic Director of Prague Shakespeare, an American expat of sorts, who's found a new community in doing English-speaking Shakespeare in a European country. But before we get into that, we've been talking a lot about the idea of exiles. Connie and Kim and I have been looking at the season that we have, and we've been noticing one of those many themes that cut across several of the plays is this idea of exile. And I think in the cultural zeitgeist right now, there are lots of folks who've been thinking a lot about what banishment looks like in the contemporary context. We're thinking about what does it mean to be a part of this community that we have, this country that we live in here in the U.S., what it means to be allowed in or not allowed in, people who have spent their time living in this country for all of their lives, most of their lives, and then being forcibly removed. And to us, that feels like a dangerous and often foreign concept. But in fact, Shakespeare wrote a lot about banishment. He wrote about exiles. And plays have often dealt with people who have been forced to leave the place that they call home. In fact, I mean, when we kind of go into the Western canon, we can go right into the biblical reference, and we can even look at the original exiles were Adam and Eve, originally exiled from their original home. So this idea of being forced from the place that you love and call home is baked into what it means to be human, something that Shakespeare was dealing with. So we're going to get into that a little bit. The title of this episode is probably going to be from Shakespeare's Coriolanus, "There's a World Elsewhere," one of the more famous lines that Coriolanus has when he himself, a famous general, a hero of Athens, is forced out of his home as well. So let's dig into this.
First on my mind, okay, we know Duke Sr. is banished out into the woods. He finds a home in the Forest Arden in As You Like It.
Right, yeah.
We know Romeo famously is banished.
Absolutely.
After killing Tybalt, after Tybalt has killed Mercutio.
Yeah.
Large ramifications on that one. We know that, like you just said, Coriolanus is banished, and as he leaves, he's telling off the people, and he says, "I banish you," which is my favorite line, actually.
Absolutely.
He yells back to the people who are banishing him, "I banish you."
Yeah, that reminds me of Timon of Athens too. Whenever he's shouting at the walls on his way out.
Exactly. While giving the big finger.
I was going to say an inappropriate gesture to the city wall.
Thumb at people.
Yeah. But it shows up. Where else were you just talking about?
Well, we were talking also in the piano lesson, right?
Piano lesson, that's right. Yeah. When it's more of a self-exile kind of thing where Lyman is really not capable of going home again, or he's not able to go home again just because of his own fears and his own...
It's not safe for him,
It's
right?
not safe for him. And so while Boy Willie is going to be going home again, Lyman is going to stick around in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, so this idea, and I think that, well, we can dig into any of these, but since we're talking a little bit about piano lesson, and that is one of the first pieces that come up for us, the South was a home for many people, including a large population of African Americans who were historically enslaved and were forced to work the land. Many of them chose to get the heck out of there as soon as they could, but many of them had also established a home. And you see that conflict in how to deal with this place that has been maybe the only home you've known, whether it's been a welcoming home or not. And you have people like Boy Willie, who was like, he's going to go back, he's going to farm that land. And then you have people like Lyman, who most likely it's not safe for him to go back for a number of reasons, including the law enforcement set up at the time, who probably have, who have a death sentence for him if he were to show up again. And institutional imprisonment and essentially a second slavery that's happening in the South. So people like Lyman, even if they would want to go back to what they would consider home, there's no home there for them.
There's no life there.
There's no life there. So this idea that there's a world elsewhere, it's a necessary way of surviving. So we have these different ways of thinking about being banished from the garden.
We get to see it in really two different ways in our season lineup. Sometimes when we look at the idea of exile and banishment and leaving that home, one might look at it as a grand adventure and a place to find something new, and a place where we can reinvent ourselves and just start a new life. When we're looking at someone like Lyman, who really does put kind of a positive spin on not going back, he's ready to meet a gal and settle into a new life in Pittsburgh and really make something of himself.
Lyman is ready to start a new life. And that's because really there's no opportunity in his past.
That's right. That's right.
There's no opportunity there. So the idea of a new life is the only way of coping with that.
Right.
But when you think about a character like Romeo, who when he's hiding in Friar Lawrence's cell after he's killed Tybalt, after Tybalt has killed Mercutio, he's cowering in Lawrence's cell, and Friar Lawrence comes back and tells him that, a happier judgment passed from the prince's lips, not body's death, but body's banishment. Romeo's response is, there's purgatory, torture, hell itself, right?
Yeah.
That there is no world without Verona's walls. That for him, without that insects, that flies can touch Juliet, but he can't touch Juliet because for him, Verona is now equal with being with Juliet, and that banishment means he's being separated from the person that he loves. And of course, the same thing with Juliet when she hears that Romeo has to leave Verona forever for good. Her response is, and that response from Juliet is of course deeply complicated in the moment that she both finds out. She thinks at first, because she gets the message from a rather emotional and slightly verbally confused nurse who's like, who's gone, who's dead, who's killed? Is it Tybalt? Is it Romeo? And when she learns ultimately that her cousin Tybalt's been killed, and she was killed then by Romeo, and that Romeo's banished, that response is also shock and despair at the thought of being separated from the person that you love. And that cuts deeply, I think, into our understanding of our own humanity. When we've established a world, we think we understand what this world, what our givens are going to be, what our day-to-day life is going to look like, who we're going to be able to be with, and then for somebody to be forcibly removed from that, it seems impossible.
When we think about this idea of being forcibly removed, we're looking at being removed from the community and the air we breathe. I mean, when we think about these young people like Romeo and like Juliet, all of their lives, they're couched in their family and they're couched in their community. And these are the people that shape them, and they don't know life beyond the walls. They have a very small world. And so when they are forcibly separated from each other, it really is like cutting off a part of your body. It is that kind of removal that makes it so dramatic.
And Shakespeare deals with this theme a lot in his plays. Of course, it shows up in the histories repeatedly. In Richard II, Bolingbroke is famously banished, and of course he's the one that ultimately in that play comes back. Richard II dies, and it's Bolingbroke who becomes then King Henry IV. And then we have a whole cycle of plays about the wars that happen around this king who essentially has usurped the throne. And that was all instigated by his banishment in Richard II. And then we have a similar theme that then I think Shakespeare's writing about all this stuff, sees the parallels. And I think that he's writing these histories because there are some parallels happening in his own contemporary world right now. There's a lot of questions going on in Elizabethan England about who's going to be assuming the throne after the queen dies. And she's getting older and older and older as Shakespeare is writing. And there's no stability in the future of the country at that moment. No one exactly really knows who's going to take the throne again when the queen passes. The entire country is really kind of living under that that cloud of uncertainty. And Shakespeare and his contemporaries are writing lots of stories, including the histories, about these characters and about these stories about people who are kicked out of the country. And then what do they do? How does the country move forward? And here in that story, in the history with Bolingbroke, there are a series of plays that get written after that. Henry IV, parts 1, parts 2, Henry V, and then the Henry VIs, and then of course Richard III. He didn't write them in sequence, but this is all part of a longer story arc that goes back to the beginning with Richard II and the instability of the crown, and of what happens when a king is deposed, and a Bolingbroke coming back. He sees that then in these Roman stories, and we see this story of Coriolanus that comes up, a great general, a storied fighter, protector of the city, and then when the senators decide that he's dangerous, they set up a plot for him to essentially, for the people to turn on him, rather, and then he gets banished. Yeah. And what does he do when he gets banished? I banish you. Yeah. And he goes to his arch enemy, right, Tullus Aufidius, to mount an army to come back and attack the city. And they're all freaking out, right? Because the greatest general is now coming for them.
Yeah.
In thinking about this idea of banishment, my brain really went to this idea where the advancement of technology and the advancement of industry lessens the impact of what our histories and our Shakespeare and even, that idea of pre-industrial story eras that we're exploring. The world is a lot smaller when you can't just get somewhere.
Yeah.
I was, I was contemplating, when my parents came over here from Korea, you couldn't just make a phone call even over to Korea. You had to go through the operator, you had to make a person-to-person call, and you had to find them to make that phone call, to make that connection. It wasn't easy to just jump on an airplane. That was, 3 months' salary to go on an airplane to go to Korea.
Right.
Even now, the weight of being separated from your community and the weight of being on your own is harder to understand sometimes. I think it's harder to grok.
So I keep coming back to this idea of community, right? Like think about Duke Sr. and As You Like It.
Yes.
He's banished from his home.
Yeah.
But a bunch of his friends decide forget this, and they go and join him. And so sort of this whole little community goes together and they find this great happiness and joy out there. And yes, it's hard and there are things that they have to deal with, but I think that's what it's about. I think a little bit I'm going to go and find my people and find my way is very different from, oh my gosh, I have to leave my people and my whole life.
Well, what's funny about As You Like It is we see 3 different story lines that all have to deal with being exiled. We know at the beginning that Duke Sr. has been sent away, and we hear that he's living this idyllic life, like Robin Hood out in the forest. So when we finally see him, we see a kind of established community, and we hear that he had been sent away. But in real time, we see Rosalind being kicked out by Duke Frederick, who just says it's time to go. You have to go. I know that you think you're comfortable here, but you need to leave. And so we see in real time that of what happens when a person in power tells somebody not in power, and Rosalind has no power at this moment, to get the heck out of town.
But even she has her good dear friend and the court jester.
Yeah.
She brings friends with her as well. So there's a hope for her. There's a we're going to figure it out kind of feeling, rather than Romeo, who's just I wish I were dead.
Absolutely. He's leaving everything behind. And Rosalind doesn't have much left. In fact, her father is out there, so perhaps she's moving towards something. Then you also have Orlando, who is being warned to get out of his house, because if he stays a minute longer, he might be burned alive in the home, right? And that then Adam, the older servant of the house, chooses to go with him and gives him some money that he's been saving up so that they have a chance to live. He's the one who's there's no safe place for him. Yeah. He's not officially being banished. His brother's not saying you get out. What he's being told is, if you don't leave, you're likely to die, which has a lot more to do with I think the story of the folks and from the context entirely different. But the idea of the Lymans and the boy Willies who were just like, the South is not safe for me. I have to get out because I'm reading all the signs and it's obvious that if I stay, I'm going to die. That's kind of where Orlando is coming from in As You Like It, and why he chooses to get out.
Yeah.
And he thinks he's going to be alone. He thinks that outdoors is going to be dangerous. He assumes, I think we've discussed before, that there's going to be violent people around and that he has to then act violently in order to survive. And he discovers the community.
That's my favorite. We talked about it already, but that's my favorite moment in the play.
Right.
When he's like he's gonna try and rob them basically to get food because he's starving.
Right.
And they're like, "Hey, just sit down, man. It's okay."
Right. Yeah. It's
like,
all
have some food.
Yeah. Like moving
He's
from
like,
the
"What?"
city where where everybody thought that there was a community, and then finding that there's actually a much more welcoming place elsewhere. But that's not how it works out in Mantua for Romeo.
Right.
He's alone. He winds up finding an apothecary. Like it's a dangerous place.
Yeah.
And even for the friar John, who has been sent to go send a message to Romeo, he can't even get to him because of disease that shuts up city walls on the way there. And so there's this danger that prevents the communication, which I think, to your point earlier, Connie, about contemporary means of communication making us feel more connected, that sense of exile may not be the same. How that being said, even though a phone call is possible, listening to folks on podcasts, Zooming, video conferencing, all that helps to bring us together. I think if there's something that we've learned in the last 6 years, it's that, a human to human connection cannot be replicated. And there can be a simulacrum of a connection with video, but it's not the same as sharing space and sharing that human to human contact.
Right.
During COVID, we had celebrated our first Thanksgiving down in Virginia alone. And
really?
It was this really strange moment because, it was just the three of us. We didn't have any friends really because we just moved down there. We didn't have any family. And, we were kind of walled off from the world. As were all of us. We were all kind of walled off. And, we did a Zoom call with our parents to, celebrate and have Thanksgiving dinner. And it was devastating, because it's just like, we are so far away and all I want to do is hug everybody.
Yeah.
And I remember the first hug that I had from someone who's not in my family. And it was, I'm tearing up thinking about it. It was just this like amazing thing that I couldn't believe was real, and it's just, that's separation from human contact.
Yeah.
It's too much sometimes,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, looking at glassy eyes across the table from both of you, I can totally. I think that's something that so many of us, I think, have a deep understanding of now. And so when these playwrights that we're highlighting in this season, and the stories that Shakespeare is telling, the story that August Wilson is telling. And so many of our playwrights deal with this idea of what it means to be a part of something, and then what it means to be cast aside.
Yeah.
And that is, as much as we don't want to always necessarily face that and think that we are somehow above or better than that, or that we have evolved from that, I think we continue to be reminded that our human condition and our society is constructed in such a way that this continues to happen. So we can attempt to change that, but and that's more for politics and political action. What we can do as theater artists is continue to, as Hamlet says, hold a mirror up to nature. And that's what we are here to do. And so in telling these stories, it reminds us of the human cost of banishment. And that's a very old word, deportation. Exile is is the exact same thing, and the human cost of forcibly removing people from their community, and that's a story that we have to continue to face, because we have to continue to put a face on it, so we understand what those costs are. On the flip side, there can be a community that gets developed from that, and we can see the beauty and the benefit of that. But again, there's a difference between choosing to go and being forced to go.
Right.
As we go into Act 2, we're going to talk about somebody who made a choice. Guy Roberts is the artistic director of Prague Shakespeare, and he chose to create an English-speaking Shakespeare company in the Czech Republic. And we're going to have a great conversation with him about the challenges and opportunities of being a voluntary exile from America in Europe, doing these stories that we all love to tell.
Legends, lovers, and timeless drama. It's all happening at PA Shakespeare Festival this summer. Join us for the Legends and Legacy season, celebrating our 35th anniversary. Subscriptions to the 2026 Summer Theater Series are on sale now. Get yours at pashakespeare.org.
So, welcome back for Act 2, where we turn to the international stage. For more than 2 decades, our guest has produced, directed, and performed around the world, building a sustained body of work in classical theater. He's the founder and artistic director of Prague Shakespeare Company, the professional English language theater of the Czech Republic, now celebrating its 18th season. Welcome to As You Mic It, Guy Roberts.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really glad to have you on the call. And right now, we're not finding you in Prague. We're actually finding you in the U.S. for this particular recording.
Yes, I got trapped in the big storm in New York, so some of my travel plans have changed. I have to tell you, though, before we start, every time you say PSF, it's a bit strange for me because our company, Prague Shakespeare Company, started off as Prague Shakespeare Festival. So for a few years, we were also PSF. We underwent getting rid of the festival word and the company in Prague.
That's fascinating. It's when we talk about PSF, when we talk about our festival, we're often sometimes confronted with, why are we still a festival? Why do we call it a festival? What prompted you all to change from the Prague Shakespeare Festival to Prague Shakespeare Company?
Yeah, so to give you a quick little bit of context on how I'm an American, how I got to Prague, I was the artistic director of the Austin Shakespeare Festival. And 20 years ago, the city of Austin gave me a grant to go to Prague and direct a play with the idea that I would then return to Austin and share my vast European knowledge of the city.
Yeah.
But on my second day there, I just thought, oh boy, I think I'm going to move to Europe. And at that time, Prague was the only major capital city in Europe that didn't have a professional English language theater. And since I'd run Shakespeare theaters and produced, I thought, well, all right, I'll start the English language theater of the Czech Republic, but I'll make Shakespeare the core of the work.
Sure.
And so I did that. And we're actually in our 19th season. Right?
19th season. So thanks for the correction.
Yeah. But I grew up totally embedded in the U.S. American regional theater system.
Sure.
And so as someone who loves Shakespeare, visions of the New York Shakespeare Festival and the Oregon Shakespeare Festival were in my head. And I thought that's just what you called a theater. But in Europe, the word festival has a very different meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And in Europe, you are only a festival if you present other people's work, but you don't necessarily produce work.
Oh, okay.
These festivals present other people's work. And so when I said, well, I'm Prague Shakespeare Festival, they would say, oh, who are you bringing in? And I said, well, what do you mean? I'm producing our own work. He goes, oh, they're not a festival then. So we realized there was a big cultural difference there. That the word festival in America usually means some kind of summer excitement that's seasonal, but only happens for a few months. And we also realized that our work was always company-based. We always had artists from around the world working with us. And so it was just better for us to move to a company model. But touring is such a part of our work. Anyways, we've played at other festivals. So, we've toured to Africa and India and the Middle East and all over Europe, the United States. What I would say are some really small differences on the surface, but that have big ramifications of being a theater artist.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, can you talk a little bit about the company now that you have? I mean, you're an American, you're
Sure.
English-based language company in the Czech Republic. You've been doing it for 19 years now. What does it mean for you to have a company? How does that company, how does it evolve? How did you get people there? What does that all look like for you?
Yeah. Well, when we started, we started very small. We were doing one show. We did that for about 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then over a decade, about 13, 14 years ago, we've been really lucky in that we partnered and worked in close cooperation with the Czech National Theatre for 14 years.
Right.
And most often, we shared a space for a long time. We shared the Kolovrat Theater, which was a small 100-seat theater.
Okay.
But the jewel box of the Czech National Theatre is the Estates Theater, or Stavovský divadlo, where Mozart premiered Don Giovanni in 1977. And it's a very beautiful theater and one of the most famous theaters in Europe. And we played over 40 productions there. So
Wow.
We're really blessed to have been able to do a lot of really amazing things there. And on that stage, for example, is a plaque right on the stage where only the artist can see. And it says Mozart stood here and conducted the magic. So it's a very special space, but we don't have a formal agreement with the National. It's not like we know that every second Saturday in September or something, we're playing there. So basically, if they have a gap in their season, they'll pick up the phone, or we'll get in touch with them, and they'll get in touch with us, and they'll say, "Hey, next, in April, we've got 2 days free. Are you interested?" And then we go from there. But we've been very lucky that way. We've also, for the last decade, given Prague Castle the Czech Summer Shakespeare Festival.
Oh,
so
wow.
there's the Czech Summer Shakespeare Festival, and we give them an English language production every year. So this year we'll perform As You Like It and Twelfth Night, both in English, at Prague Castle. And that Summer Shakespeare Festival, when Václav Havel, the first playwright, president of the Czech Republic, he believed that every democratic country needed a Shakespeare Festival. And so he helped some producers. They got together and they started this great tradition at Prague Castle. And it's all the shows are in Czech except for ours. So, and there's an enormous, really vibrant tradition of Shakespeare in the Czech Republic. And I think a lot of it goes back to the days when they were occupied by the Nazis or the communists, because of course there was censorship in the theater, but Shakespeare was allowed because Shakespeare was Shakespeare, the great man Shakespeare. So you could do King Lear, you could do Macbeth, and you could subtly be making some sort of statement about the current regime of government. And so Shakespeare became really beloved by the people because they felt like it was a code that they could participate in. And of course, theater and the movement of freedom in the Czech Republic are forever linked. And so I think what happened 20 years ago because I was very happy in running Austin Shakespeare and my life in Austin, it was a really great experience. But I think I'd never been to a culture that valued theater as much. Growing up in the United States, even though I was extremely lucky, I was very fortunate. I essentially almost always made my living just from theater, but I was always a little ashamed. And people would say, "What do you do?" Well, I do Shakespeare plays. I'm an actor and director. And they would kind of get this look on their face and they would say, "Okay, well, what's your real job?" And then I was like, "No, that is my job." And then they couldn't quite wrap their heads around that. So then the next question would be, "Well, do you do TV or film?" Because if you're on a TV show or film, then you're a real performer, And so then to go to this environment where theater was so beloved and viewed as something essential. I mean, when young people go to the theater in Czech Republic, I mean, they dress up because there's something viewed, it's important to their culture. And when a young person wants to be an actor, director, I've heard this from many Czechs, the family is so excited in the way almost traditional American family would be about someone being a lawyer or doctor. Because there's cultural prestige to it. And that was very powerful. The other thing I would say about Europe, and part of my progression and learning, in Coriolanus, there is this very famous quote, "There is a world elsewhere." And I always kind of sensed there was. I was very content in American theater. I was doing it all the proper way. I was a member of all the unions I was supposed to be a member of. But I was always curious about a world elsewhere. And moving to Europe and really experiencing a different way, not just of creating or doing theater, but thinking about theater.
Mm.
The differences are so profound. So in the Czech Republic, for example, everything is basically on the rep system, but it's much closer to Shakespeare's rep system.
Mm-hmm.
So at a normal Czech theater, it will be a different play every day. And if you're in a great hit, I mean, I just had dinner a couple nights ago with Karel Hřmanek, who is the artistic director of Divadlo Bez Zábradlí. He's in New York now. And they last season closed a show that had been running in their rep with essentially the same two actors for 34 years. Wow. And it would play twice a month, but they knew this was their, and so that way of thinking about a part when you're spending, first of all, they'll spend 2, 3, 4 months in rehearsal, but you approach the role differently. So if you're going to play Hamlet or whatever, Juliet, whatever, any role, and okay, if it's a big hit, I'm probably only going to play it maybe 10 to 15 times this year, but I might play it for 10 years. That's just a different way to approach it rather than we're rushing as much as possible, doing everything possible to create the show in 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Right. And then we're going to play it for 3 to 7 weeks and then it's over, never coming back to it.
Yeah.
And that is, it's hard to wrap your head around now after having been there for so long. I don't think I could deal as an actor with a run just doing the same show every day for a month or two. That would be very strange for me,
Yeah.
And also as a director, I remember the first time I directed. Sorry, I'm giving you a very long answer. I've gone off on many different topics.
That's fine,
here.
Guy. That's fine. Keep going.
But I remember the first time I directed in the Czech theater, I directed a production of Much Ado About Nothing in Czech. And, we had 2 or 3 months rehearsal, but I was so used to working quickly that by the end of the first week, I had staged the whole show and I kind of didn't know what to do with these actors.
Right.
And so, I would try to, everything was through translators, but it turned out to be a really nice production for the theater, ran for many, many, many years at rep. But at one point, and there were 2 very famous Czech female actors in the show, and they were older. They were in their 50s. And these are very well known. I mean, the country's 10 million people, so it's like the size of New York or something. Right?
Yeah.
But they came to me and they said, "We're very sorry, we need to have a meeting." And I'm thinking, oh my God, what did I do? I did something culturally inappropriate, or I've offended them, or they're hating the play. And so I said, well, of course, let's talk. And they said, well, we have a big problem. I said, okay, well, tell me, let's work on it. And they said, we think you don't like us. Well, what do you mean? I think you're amazing actors. Well, I'm having a great time. And they said, well, you're not yelling at us. And they said, actors are children and directors must yell at us. And I just said, well, I'm never going to yell at you. Why would I yell at you? I'm really happy. But they were used to this kind of old Soviet style system where the director is God. And if you're not making someone cry or some horrible thing, drama's happening. It was very old school. It's like all the work we've done in the last decade, 20 years of how things used to be. Right. Czech Republic is still kind of there because it takes a while to get there. I mean, you go to theaters backstage. My wife is a cancer survivor, and she was undergoing chemotherapy during a production of Hamlet that we were doing that Tina Packer came and directed. The smell of backstage was really hard for my wife to deal with because back in the day, and all the crew are smoking and they're drinking, and it's just, that's how it is. They're having beers in the green room and smoking cigarettes nonstop. That's kind of changed a bit, but it's definitely a different world.
Yeah. Wow.
And, the other thing I would say, and this, I'll stop my monologue, in my process of kind of really understanding the difference between American and European theater, the biggest difference, though, I would say relates to subsidy and governmental support.
Yeah.
So there is tremendous, even though we personally, our company doesn't really benefit from this at all. We receive no money from the Czech government. Most European theaters receive enormous parts of their budget from the Czech government or the EU or whatever country that they're in.
Right.
And so consequently, they have the freedom to take more artistic risks because they're not always worried about, making sure the box office hits.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, that level of subsidy supports that kind of artistic freedom that really can be quite healthy. But, when COVID happened, the German government gave €1 billion to all the arts organizations in the country to keep everyone on staff, right? So they were on their salary.
Yeah.
And then COVID continued, and the German government gave another €1 billion to all the cultural organizations. And so, the level of support is beyond anything that can really be imagined, I think, in the United States from a governmental agency.
Yeah.
But the consequence is there's not a lot of individual philanthropy, and corporate support is quite small.
Sure.
Because to an average person, why should I give money to the theater? My government gives money, and that's what my taxes are for.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a freedom and consequently having that base of funding from governments allows ticket prices to be extremely affordable. You can go to a national theater often for €10, €5, and that's a decent seat. Yeah. And there's all sorts of other benefits. And that coming back to the American regional theater, or even, in something in New York where you're having to deal with just the different way the arts are structured and funded, I think will be very challenging for me now. So yeah, it's been quite an education, and I'm just still so excited and blown away by some of the work I'm seeing out there. We were in London a couple of weeks ago, and we saw the new Eagle and Hogan, All My Sons and Cranston.
Yeah.
Fantastic production. So, there is amazing work happening out there that's really artistically fulfilling. And that's really exciting because sometimes, I personally will get so in the weeds about how hard it is to, run a theater and do everything. But then every once in a while, you'll go have a night in the theater like All My Sons, so you realize, oh, that's funny.
Right, absolutely.
Or, something as simple as, we just did Christmas Carol, and for years I said, we're never going to do Christmas Carol. That's selling out. I was being very Scrooge-like about it. And then 2 years ago, I said, because everyone in the company, even my artists, kept saying, let's do Christmas Carol.
Really?
Be fine. So we do it. Everybody's happy the whole rehearsal period. They're all singing Christmas songs in the Christmas spirit. Audiences love it. Sells out immediately. And I'm thinking, my God, now I see Christmas Carol's amazing. I was just being an arrogant artist. Like, Christmas Carol's amazing. It makes everybody happy and it makes money. What's wrong with this? So, yeah, but there's all kinds of little lessons I'm learning all the time.
That's wonderful. I'm glad that you're still open to learning. I'm curious, Guy. I've got so many questions running through my head. Yeah. One of them in this idea of productions in reps that last year after year after year, only maybe going into a theater for a couple of nights. What's the kind of physical space? We have, scenery and costumes and lights that take, a week to get set up, and tech and, weeks to build ahead of time. What are the kinds of, if I were to walk in to a Prague Shakespeare Festival production, visually, what am I going to be encountering? I can understand with the story, I'm going to be an English language Shakespeare, but what am I going to be visually encountering as well?
Yeah, we are a little different than some of the other typical Czech or European theaters. So at most European theaters, I would say the sets are just as elaborate or interesting as you would expect. We try to operate, because so much of our work is touring.
Yeah.
That we really try to have kind of almost a bare stage aesthetic, or we have something that can be portable and installed in 4 hours.
Gotcha.
So it's sort of globe style a lot on a lot of our shows. Focus on costumes and lights and sound more than scenic elements.
Right.
But we do have certain shows that, have real big set designs and things. And for us, we're constantly thinking, okay, if the show is a big hit in Prague, maybe we want to take it to Venice or we want to go to Germany.
Right.
Okay, how are we going to do that? So we have to put this in a truck.
Mm-hmm.
I just directed a Hamlet, a multilingual Hamlet. It's a co-production, Prague Shakespeare, Ukrainian theater. And it's a really great show. We're really loving it. We played it, in Gdansk and Verona and places. But it's got this big set. So we've got to load all these mirrors onto a truck and drive a big truck, And so we try to avoid that as much as possible and have things that fit in suitcases and go on trains and planes with the company as much as possible.
So there's a world in which a Prague Shakespeare production could come to Pennsylvania and sit down with a company.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's how we kind of try to do everything. That'd be amazing.
Excellent.
PSF and PSC.
Tell me about the artists that you work with. Yeah. Are these English-speaking European actors? Are they Americans who are expats? What's the makeup of the individuals in your company like?
Yeah, we have a company of artists who we've worked with over the years. It's probably about 80 people, I would say, are in our company. They're located all over the world.
Yeah.
And we'll come together in Prague to do a special project, or some of them just come every summer. They're part of our faculty and main artists in our summer program. Mm-hmm. Someone like Scott Jackson has been with us a lot of times, Lisa Volpe, people like that. And then we have a bunch of people who have moved to Prague just because of our company. We've probably got a group of there's probably 10 or 12 Americans or people from the UK who've moved to Prague to join our staff. And then other people have lived in Prague. So it's a real multinational company. We've got people that have done multiple shows with us based out of India and across Europe and Canada and the US. But typically we come to Prague to make the show.
Yeah.
And then we tour it. And we like to think of ourselves not as a Prague or Czech company, but we're an international company based in Prague.
Gotcha.
So we have a smaller, really cute 140-seat proscenium theater, which is our home. But that's not really where all of our shows happen. So I would say our smaller scale shows happen there. And we use that for rehearsal, but we're performing our more high profile things at the Czech National Theater at Prague Castle around tour.
Amazing. Amazing. You had mentioned you're married and you have children. I'm curious about what's it like raising a family in Europe, running a theater company? How did that calculus of okay, we're having kids now. How did that impact the choices that you make to be an artist and a dad and a husband in this international setting?
Well, I think anyone who runs a theater is totally insane anyway. So, and you add a partner and kids to that, and wow. Well, we have two small boys. I have an amazing daughter from when I was younger, another relationship, but she's an adult living in DC. Our kids go to a Czech English private school because we didn't want to put them in a fully Czech school because we wanted them to be prepared enough that if they wanted to go to school in America, that their English was fluent enough and they had done math and English and stuff like that. So they're in a bilingual school. And it's tough. It's really tough because our kids are 5 and 7 and they're at the age where they're really cute and you just want to be home with them. But their golden hour, is 5 o'clock on, that's when you've got to get ready and go to the theater.
Yeah.
So what we have done in our family is we really personally backed off being in projects as actors for a couple of years.
Sure.
We'll still do a couple of shows a year.
Yeah.
And because the rep system, doing a couple of shows, means 5 or 6 nights a month, we've got a babysitter. And so that really helps. All rehearsals, we rehearse during the day while they're at school, and we really try to be home. But what's hard as artistic directors, even if you're not in the show, people like it when you're at the theater.
It's nice to be around, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And if nothing else, they want to talk to you about something. So I've got a great support team. Alyssa Levin, Jeff Smith, and Josh Morrison, my associate directors, who are often, one of us is always at the theater. Yeah. But it's challenging balancing that, and especially as you get older. I think about I've spent a lot of time in theaters.
Mm-hmm.
Am I ever gonna be able to have this night again with my oldest son? No, because he's gonna get older.
Yeah.
And I don't want to regret being in theater too much. So that's a real balance. We are, thankfully our kids don't totally hate theater. They sort of like it. So we put them in Christmas Carol, and that helps.
That's good. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I completely understand. I've got now a 17-year-old who's looking at college. And of course now it's like, it's going to be films. It's just, and now she's looking at like wanting to go into film. Like that apple doesn't fall very far from the tree. And I've got an 11-year-old who right now is playing 3 different instruments. I'm like, okay, so maybe not theater, maybe later, but there's definitely like, you know, maybe he'll go off and be that architect that he's talking about doing as well, but maybe he'll just be in the theater. So it's a part of, you know, like, again, you know, like if you were a lawyer or you were a businessman or you were a stock trader or whatever, like, you know, your children would be around that kind of an environment. And so they would see that as the kind of example, but they have theater parents instead. So yeah, they're going to be in A Christmas Carol. That's part of it.
Yeah. And they, you know, I mean, they had a great time. They did it for the first time this year. My oldest son did it last year. And, but after the first show, the next day we said, okay, we got to go to the theater again. And they were just, what? We have to do it again? We already did it last night. We're like, no, we have to do it again.
Amazing. So Guy, you and I both graduated from Boston University. You got your bachelor's degree and I got my MFA. I'm wondering, I'm just out of curiosity, like I met you when you'd already been doing Prague, but then I read up on you and saw that we shared an alma mater. What was that experience like for you at Boston, and how did that set you up for the work that you did?
Well, I really loved my time at Boston University. I knew I was really serious about theater and wanted to be an actor, and I grew up in Texas, so going to Boston where it was cold just seems exotic and amazing. I think something was a little different for me than most people, or maybe it's common now, I don't know. But when I went to BU, Boston University had a professional relationship with the Huntington Theater.
Yep.
And in theory, students could do shows there, but no one ever did.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I didn't know anything. And I was probably handled every situation completely inappropriate way. But my first year as a freshman, I heard there was this theater and I wanted to start working in the theater. So I got a meeting with Peter Altman, who was the artistic director. And I said, you don't know who I am, but I'm going to do plays with you because I would rather carry a spear in your show than play Hamlet in a college show. Nice. And he kind of got this weird look on his face. He said, okay. But what happened was I started doing this. So I was very, very lucky. By the time I graduated BU, I'd already done 6 shows at the Huntington and had my equity card. So, and just I loved my training. I mean, BU, it was so important, fundamental, the way it developed me. And I had amazing professors, Rich Sear, Robert Kaplan, Claudia Hill, Jim Sproul, all these amazing professors, John Lipsky. And then I also got to not just do student shows, I was in Huntington shows, sometimes with a part, sometimes just understudy, but then I would go on as an understudy. And so I feel like I got a really good education. And what I discovered when I was doing those shows at the Huntington, and I was nobody, I was the lowest person on the totem pole.
Right.
But I realized I had a lot of opinions. So I would have an opinion about the show poster. I would have an opinion about the marketing. And I realized I was talking, you know, I talked to Peter Altman sometimes, the artistic director, and I realized maybe I'm actually an artistic director because I had a lot of opinions about the way everything should be run, you know, and I think that set me up. And then after school, I was very lucky. I got an agent to New York, but immediately when I was in New York, I wasn't focused on getting auditions as an actor. I was focused on trying to start a theater.
Yeah.
Because I was convinced I was going to start the next New York Shakespeare Festival, you know. And also we got a group together, some friends of mine from BU, some friends of mine from Juilliard. We did what is probably like 3 worst Shakespeare plays ever inflicted on New York City. You know, they were just terrible. Like, we had so much fun. We didn't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
And we kind of learned by just doing it.
Sure. Yeah. So, Guy, last question. What is it about Shakespeare that still appeals to you? And why do you think that there's a relevance and a need to keep doing it, and doing it in Europe, doing it in a way that you're continue to travel with it? Why for you is Shakespeare that's still important?
My answer has changed on this. If you had asked me 5 years ago, I probably would have said something about the timelessness of the stories and how it touches all of us. And now, as I'm getting older, I think it's more simple. I think the plays are just great. They are fantastic plays that audiences like to see. And also the reason they survive is theater artists like to do them. If theater artists didn't like to do them, we would find other plays. But the roles, whether it's Cleopatra or Rosalind or Juliet, are life-changing for actors.
Yeah.
And so we as artists, in a way, also keep them alive by continually doing them everywhere in the world, because they fulfill some need for us. And luckily, because the plays are so well written, there is that sort of, something in the play will speak to someone in the audience. But I think a lot of times we have forgotten how important the artist element is, in that we've been keeping them alive because it's some sort of artistic need that we are getting fulfilled by doing it.
That's a really great perspective. I appreciate hearing that, Guy. And you're right. They are just good. They're good damn plays.
Yeah.
Guy, thanks for taking the time. I really appreciate being able to have some opportunity to learn more about your past and to share this with our community. It's been a really good conversation. Thanks for being on As You Mic It.
Thanks so much for having me.
Ready for an epic summer? Experience the Legends and Legacy season at PA Shakespeare Festival. It's a summer of unforgettable stories, rock and roll nights, and heartbreaking rivalries. Subscriptions to the 2026 Summer Theater Series are on sale now. Subscribe today at pashakespeare.org.
And now it's time for Act 3, a peek behind the curtain.
A peek behind the curtain!
I even knew it was coming.
You saw my finger heading to the button, man. There are no secrets here.
In our conversation with Guy, one of the things that came up was the idea of plays that have a life far beyond the 2, 3, 4 weeks of performances that one might see. And that what comes up for us when we're thinking about that is, here at Pennsylvania Shakespeare Festival, we're producing essentially an entire year's worth of theater over a very tight summer window. With the students at DeSales University and the spring semester ending, and we have about 10 weeks of performances, about 12 to 14 weeks of time to produce our summer theater series. We take that whole year's worth of programming that many theaters do, and we collapse it all into a very tight window. How the heck do we do that? And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about as we in this episode of A Peek Behind the Curtain. So Connie, you are the associate producer. Your job is to cast and put everybody in. What do you tell people when you're talking about what it's like to work at PSF with this kind of a schedule?
What I tell people is really, in a nutshell, what you just told our audience. We do an entire season. We do an entire calendar year in one summer. Yeah. And we have a hard stop on that, that first Wednesday in August, because we have to get out because DeSales wants their buildings back. So really,
they need them back. They gotta get them.
That's right. They need them back.
Right?
They generously give it to us for the summer. So when we have that hard stop, it is really a defining moment in our season. Our season is now over. And when I think about all of that and how much we're doing, I think that Kevin White had said it best, where it is like we're carefully setting up each of those dominoes.
Sure. Yeah.
And it is a very elaborate and beautiful domino setup. And then once we start, we flick that and we watch everything happen. We watch the waterfalls, we watch the magic. But it is different because, last year we did the producers and we had people coming up to us when we closed saying, man, I could see that forever. And we can't just we just can't keep it running. We have other things planned.
Right. And one of the reasons that we can't keep it running, again, because we have other things planned in that space, we set these shows up. We design these shows for them to have a short life. Now, we may sometimes have the benefit of being able to rent costumes or do something like where for 1812's Play That Goes Wrong, the set came in kind of pre-built. And then when it was done, we put it back in a truck and sent it away. So that production itself did have a life before us and after us. It went back to 1812 for another run in that winter time. But that is not typical of what we do because we do design things to have a short life, that they have a very brief window of beauty. Yeah.
Yeah. But it really is sort of this hot spot because it's a short, very, very bright light.
Yeah.
When we have our runs, we are doing each actor is going to do 7 shows a week. And that's a lot.
Yeah. And some of the actors in the rep actually are doing 8 shows a week when we do, because we do
right.
4 of each. We're doing 4 of the Moriartys and 4 Romeo and Juliets in the same week. So it's 8 shows a week. Yeah.
And I try and tell all of the actors that are potentially coming in, this is going to be an intense couple of weeks for you. This is no joke. And it is a marathon, and you have to really be ready for it. You have to be prepared for it.
Yeah.
I think that's where the magic is to me. It's we bring all of these people in.
Yeah.
We ship people in from all across the country.
Yeah.
Designers and technicians and actors and directors and all of the people who make everything happen.
Yeah.
And then they all go home. It's like it's almost like the circus in a
sure.
way. There's
Yeah.
something and it has that sort of like magical party. I get like why we say festival.
Right.
Because
Sure.
it is temporary, but it's huge. The amount of people that we bring in at one time, like 200 artists, and then we have between 150 and 200 volunteers every summer that make all the things run. And then our audiences, what do we get? Like 30,000 people.
Yeah.
Each summer,
on average,
and that's we bring in this whole community that kind of settles in, and then when the winds change, they all go home. It's pretty wild.
You're right. It's the concentration of energy is where that magic happens, and because we have multiple shows happening, and at any given day we've got rehearsals happening plus performances happening, 2 different performance spaces. We program each of our spaces based on what's happening in the morning and what's happening in the afternoon and what's happening in the evening. And on any given day, those can be 3 separate things that are happening. There's also this collision of energies, of ideas, of creativities that happen. So you could bump into a designer working on a show that you're not working on, but be able to go to not only remember that person from years before, or having worked with them elsewhere in the country, whether that's in Philadelphia or New York or somewhere else in the U.S. or beyond, and come together in this time to create some really exciting, one of a kind work that'll never be seen again. And then you're right. Yeah. Then we go on off, we feed our creativity elsewhere. We bump into each other in other theater spaces. And then in the summertime, we come back and we do this again. And it's that collective energy and that compression of time that is where that magic can happen.
And that is so different than the sort of traditional, like year-long programming model, because you bring in the people for that show.
Yeah.
You bring in those 4 designers and those 10 actors, and they have the space at that time, and then they leave, and then the next group comes, and then they leave. Right. And for us, everybody's here at the same time, mostly.
Yeah. And so that it allows the actors to be able to then, and the artists to be able to see each other's work. They can pop into if they're not rehearsing, they can go see what's happening and what their colleagues are doing in another show. It also allows, I think it allows us to think about how, and when, like in these conversations that we have here on the podcast, how these plays are talking to each other. It allows the audiences to start to draw connections between them, and it allows the actors to also see how they're part of a larger, broader mosaic in the work that we're doing.
Yeah. One of the things that I know our actors really love is that we provide them with 10 comp tickets so that they could see all of you. And I think a lot of people outside here don't know this, but when you come in as an actor or as any company member, you're given comp tickets, and you're limited to the number per production.
Sure.
To encourage you to see the other performances and the other actors and the other players in the summer, and they love that. That is one of their favorite things because, I have people coming and saying, I don't often get the opportunity to see this much theater.
Right.
They're always working, and just being able to, on an afternoon, be able to go see, a lot of folks went to go see Penelope last year. And I was thinking about that because Penelope was kind of running independently before there was stuff on the main stage. Yeah. And so a lot of people had the opportunity to see that, and they were just delighted that they had that moment. Yeah. And I love that. This is one of those times where it's like we feed that energy and we feed that love of theater for makers of theater.
Yeah. It's also great it's great to watch the veterans of PSF show up for a 10 o'clock matinee of the children's show or of Shakespeare for Kids. So that they're there supporting the younger theater makers, and also to be around the energy of a room full of 6 and 7 and 8-year-olds watching theater, maybe experiencing it for the first time.
Well, Jason, when we think about having like this sort of limited season timeline, we don't give everybody the same kind of production budgets either.
That's true. We don't. That's and one of the ways that we're able to do the scale of work that we're able to do. We're able to do 9 shows in a season. Is we can budget things differently. We budget things differently in time and scale. Some things, and the things that are on the main stage in the Schubert Theater often get a lot of resources. But we're also thinking about in the Schubert, how does that set work in the morning and then move away for the from the children's show, move away for the afternoon show, and the afternoon show in July or early July is different than the afternoon and evening show in late July or August. What's the space like when it's Jane Austen versus what's the space like when it's Coriolanus, whereas Sheila the Magical is still happening every morning on that space. So thinking about how these plays all talk to each other, there's often a conversation, and there's regularly a conversation with the designers about, well, what does this space look like and how do we utilize these resources and share them? Then when we're dealing with the repertory, this year it's Romeo and Juliet and Moriarty. We're hiring one scenic designer to do both of those shows. And then there's a question of like, okay, great. How does the 1 hour changeover get achieved? Right. What are the things that are being shared? Are there things being shared, or is Romeo and Juliet wiping away, and is there a wagon that brings Moriarty on? But how do you think about the limitations of space and time to then activate the creativity? Because it really is, we have limitations of space and time, and we compress that so that then we ignite a lot of people's curiosity. The musical happens a lot earlier. The musical often kind of has its own space, and it gets more breadth than other shows do, because musicals often require more physical space, whether it's drop and wings for scene changes or the chorus or the orchestra pit or what have you, so that it needs a little bit more breathing room in order to make that show happen just with resources. And then again, in order for us to do the piano lesson this year and for us to start as soon as we are doing it this season, our solution to that is that we're actually rehearsing that show for the first 2 weeks before we even have space here. Right. We're rehearsing in Philadelphia with a Philly-based company, and we're building the set with an outside company. I think it's Philadelphia Scenic Works this year, is building the scenery, and then we'll be shipping in pieces as they complete them. We're going to paint them and then stand the set up so that we can start the season as strongly as possible with quality being one of our key values. Yeah. And then you've got our As You Like It, our play on community tour of As You Like It, which is a show that has to be designed in order to travel around.
Go in the truck and come out of a truck 30 times.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then you have the actors that are actually setting up everything. And
absolutely.
They are their own crew.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a very different kind of aesthetic and model intended to be an outreach that can, and then in a flexible production that can go anywhere, whether that's the grounds in front of a library, or that's on a festival stage for what's happening at the in Easton, in their farmers market, or it's in any kind of nimble kinds of spaces, indoors or outdoors, that play on community tour production, which is free for anybody in the public to see these shows, is really intended to be quick in, focus on the actors, focus on the storytelling, and quick out. So the resources that we have for each of the shows really kind of depends on the needs of time and space, and it allows us some flexibility then in being able to do a dynamic and varied 9-show performance season or summer theater series.
Well, do you ever feel envious of those that get to do this? I want to say during the school year, because I still don't know how to separate school year from summertime. But you know what I mean? Like, do you ever feel
like the main theater season, right? There are theaters that shut down over the summer. Like they take their breath, and that's as soon as we're waking up. Do I feel envious of them? Yeah. I mean, it's a different. I was just at a theater last night at a regional theater, watching a production and seeing what Kim was talking about. The kind of company comes in, works on a show, puts all their resources into the show, and then walks away. And it has a different. It has a different rhythm. It has a different energy. It has a different kind of concentration. And there are definitely pluses and minuses to that. I think that what makes PSF special is that concentration of energy and time and space. Is there a world in which we can have the energy, have the idea, have a kind of a PSF brand that can kind of go beyond? Yes. And there are ways we are looking at how we can do that into our future. Yeah. But I think that's going to require partnerships. It's going to require flexible thinking. It's going to require, we can't change. There are certain things that we cannot change. We cannot change the DeSales University calendar.
Right.
We can't change the Labuda Performing Arts space being a space that is actively used by Act 1 during the academic year. So then we are faced with other questions on if we wanted to go beyond the summer theater series, what does that look like? In many things we've talked about here on the podcast, we are doing that with our expanded education program, our Willpower educational tour, which has gone for 25 years into schools, middle schools and high schools, and has reached 250,000 students in the 25 years. We're continuing on with that kind of work, what other kind of education outreach we can do, what other kind of engagement work we can do. That's all a part of it. And then if the performances can find a life elsewhere, either through co-productions like Penelope with Theater Horizon, that's going to be things that are kind of on the horizon as we're visioning of what the future for PSF can be. And that's a peek behind the curtain.
Thanks, Jason. And that wraps up another episode of As You Mic It. A huge thanks to Guy Roberts for joining us today. And a reminder, single tickets are now on sale. To get yours, visit us at pashakespeare.org/tickets or by calling the box office at 610-282-WILL. That's 610-282-9455. For all of us here at As You Mic It, thanks for listening, and we'll see you at Labuda. Thank you for listening to As You Mic It, a Pennsylvania Shakespeare Festival presentation recorded on the beautiful campus of DeSales University. Our music is by Cedric Lamar, with hosts Jason King-Jones, Kim Carson, and Connie Behringer. For more information on our summer theater series, giving opportunities, tickets, and more, visit pashakespeare.org. Be sure to like, subscribe, and we'll see you at Labuda.
Behind every standing ovation is a network of patrons who know that theater changes lives. With tickets funding only half the cost, PSF counts on contributions to produce world-class theater, cultivate new audiences, and nurture future generations of artists. Give today at pashakespeare.org/support. Great theater is a collaboration both on stage and off.